Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to share with you a little bit about project-based learning. This is something that I've actually been interested in for a long time and I have never really understood it, so I was grateful for the chance to explore it a little bit more. I teach 7th through 12th grade science, and a lot of schools are actually trying to shift their curriculum to be more project or problem-based. So here's what I have learned about project-based learning. First, I just wanted to share a little bit about what project-based learning is and isn't, because before I did the research for this, I was kind of under the impression that project-based learning means that instead of giving a test, you assign a project and the kids complete it, and yeah, you use that as an assessment rather than like a traditional test. But that's actually not what's meant by project-based learning. What it is that students learn content through addressing a real life and hopefully relevant problem. They What project-based learning isn't is a dessert project. So it's not a project that you assign like a poster or some other product that a student creates after all of the material has already been covered in class. It's also not meant to be homework. It's meant to be done in class and completed in class. And it's not the same thing as just having a lot of hands-on activities or labs or products that the kids create. Um, Some educators have a lot of strong feelings about PBL, which will be obvious to you if you look online and do any research. Some think that PBL is like a cure-all for all the lack of engagement they see in American schools, and others say that PBL has a lot of problems and it's not rigorous enough and it shouldn't be used, certainly not on a large scale. But like any educational model, PBL has pros and cons, and a lot of those pros and cons depend on how the model is implemented. So some of the positive things about PBL is that students play an active role in determining the project plan. The goal is that they will have kind of a starting point, and that from there they will make a decision about what they want their project or their product to be. The learning is often collaborative because it's done in groups typically, and students get to apply the content that they're learning to a problem in their immediate community, which makes it a lot more relevant. In addition, some studies show that test scores do go up for students in low and high performing schools, and especially in low performing schools, attendance is better when PBL is used as a model for teaching. Most students find projects to be more engaging and rewarding than just sitting down and learning from a textbook, so that is another pro. But there are also cons, and if you go online, you'll see all of these. A con is that students may not learn as much content just because so much time is devoted to doing the project and not much time is devoted to direct instruction and vocabulary learning. So the students may not actually learn um, as wide a range of content, even though they may learn it more deeply. In addition, the collaborative effect of PBL may reduce its efficacy. So if you have kids that really don't work well together, a lot of time can be taken up just trying to get the kids to work together, and that can reduce, how much the project can benefit them. Appropriate projects can be difficult to find and design, and going along with that, PBL planning can be really time consuming for instructors and for students. It takes a lot of time to plan these projects to make sure that they accomplish the goals they were set out to accomplish and then to complete them. Students may not be prepared to learn through self-directed projects because they may have never been taught that way before. And in my experience, a lot of students coming, especially from middle school, have kind of gotten used to a lot of book learning and have not gotten much experience with critical thinking or problem solving. And as a result, students may feel uncomfortable learning in an environment that's less black and white. PBL doesn't really have right and wrong answers. It just has a problem that students work on together. So it's not like studying for a test, which is a little bit more concrete. Before we talk anymore, I wanted to talk about policy and PBS or PBL, sorry, and how policy shifts Before doing the research, I did not know that PBL has actually enjoyed a long history in America and is not at all a new idea. Um, so if you look here, in the post-World War I years in the 1920s saw a swing away from rote learning. People were concerned that the kids were just learning from textbooks and that they weren't being prepared for real life, so that there was a shift toward project-based learning. But then after World War II in the 1950s and 60s, as America was engaged in the Cold War and very concerned about beating the Soviets and beefing up math and science programs, there was a swing back toward rote learning. And this was also the time when the AP program was started, basically as a direct result of that effort to try to um, be to win at the Cold War. The 1970s, during the hippie years, saw a swing away from rote learning. And in the 1990s, there was a swing back toward rote learning and standards-based learning with the No Child Left Behind Act and all that followed. And now that it's the 2000s, 2020, we're seeing a swing back toward PBL. But this is not a new idea. And basically, what my research has revealed is that this is because policy has been created basically in response to dissatisfaction with the status quo. So, policymakers want students to have an education that's rigorous and highly academic and has a wide breadth of learning, but that seems to be kind of mutually exclusive to having an education that has a depth of learning where kids are learning the content in a way that really prepares them for moving on to a career and to college. So the policymakers seem to have basically vacillated between, focusing on depth of learning, needing to have learning that is not rote, that's not from a book, that is more project based, and needing them simultaneously to have a wide breadth of learning so that they can pass standardized tests and learn all the material that they need to learn. And as far as I can tell, the policy has really just kind of shifted back and forth. And obviously, I'm sure that the ideal is somewhere in the middle, but that middle ground has been hard to achieve. Culturally, PBL has a lot of advantages because it plays to the strengths of students that are from a collectivist worldview. Students who come from a collectivist worldview really benefit when learning happens through group dialogue and cooperation. And they also just culturally emphasize groups over individuals, and PBL does have so much group work. This is a plus. In PBL, functioning as a group member is very important, and that also goes along with a collectivist worldview. So for a lot of kids, it can work really well. Even for kids that aren't from a collectivist worldview, they can benefit from learning to work well with others. That's a skill that is needed in every workplace. PBL also gives students a chance to address real issues, including issues of social justice. And this is a great quote from the Teachers Academy. It says, "There are few things more powerful in education than showing students that they can make a difference. While not every issue of social justice is adaptable to a classroom project, many are. The basis of many project-based learning lessons are issues of social justice." And so this gives kids a chance to explore their own culture and the culture around them through the lens of social justice, and can be really beneficial to a lot of kids. And lastly, PBL reduces learning for learning's sake and shifts more toward students doing something useful with their knowledge. This is a great quote from Boss. She says, "Why is this approach more likely than rote memorization to lead to deeper understanding? Relevance plays a big role. Projects give students a real-world context for learning, creating a strong need to know. Motivation is another factor. Projects offer students choice and voice, personalizing the learning experience." And for students who are not very motivated by just sitting and learning out of a book, this is great because it brings learning into it helps kids understand that the learning is something that you do so that you can then do something useful with that knowledge that impacts your community. Additionally, PBL can prepare students to become good citizens by engaging them in projects that impact society. whether that's at a global level or a local level. Some of the projects I've read about schools were schools in America were partnering with schools in Kenya to do a math project together, which is great. Here is a great resource. It's called the PBL Project and Beyond. It has a lot of projects on it, and I've chosen to highlight a few just to show you how PBL can empower students to positively impact society. So here's one. This was an idea from that website. What's the best way to promote tourism in our state or city or country? And here is how it would be implemented. For science, students would study and identify weather and climate patterns and figure out when tourists should visit. For math, students would conduct surveys and gather data to figure out what kinds of things attract tourists in the first place. And for social studies, students would conduct interviews and figure out what types of businesses and attractions could work for their community specifically. Here's another great one. This is has kids designing an outdoor learning space. So for math, they figure out what should the shape be and how much area it'll cover and how much it'll cost and what materials they'll need. For the science portion, they will talk about what should be grown in the learning space. And for social studies, they will figure out what community partners need to be involved in creating the outdoor learning space. And they will actually go out and get those community partners involved. Here's one that's kind of fun. This is hatching baby chicks. This is something that probably a lot of us did in grade school. I know I did. So for math, where should the incubator go? To me, this is a little iffy. I don't know if that really constitutes math. But for science, what do living things need to grow? What do eggs need? How will those needs be met in the classroom? And then for social studies, who in the community can help learn how to care for the chicks? So do they have resources that they can call on, like a veterinarian or somebody who can help them care for the chicks once they're hatched? And then what are they going to do with the chicks once they have hatched? Are they going to give them to people so that they can lay eggs and that they can have eggs? Like, what are they going to do with the chicks? Lastly, here's one that's neat, building a war monument for Memorial Day. For math, how will they design the memorial? How much will it cost? And for science, what impact does war have on landscapes, which is an interesting question, and how can war-torn landscapes recover? For social studies, students research the history of Memorial Day, and they kind of do a write-up for that project. So these are just some ideas on how PBL can help students to impact the society that they live in, not hypothetically, but actually in practice. PBL can have a very positive effect on families, again, depending on how it is implemented. So in high poverty, low achieving areas, PBL implementation has been shown to raise some test scores, especially in informational reading and social studies. This study in particular found that writing scores stayed about the same, although they said that for the teachers, actually, the teachers' writing scores went up, which is interesting. So it's possible that if the study were continued, that those scores would, the teachers' scores would kind of transfer over to the students and their scores would go up also. As I've said before, in high poverty areas, it's been shown that student attendance is better in schools that implement PBL, which is to everyone's benefit. It's to the benefit of every family to have a student that has good school attendance so that that student can go on to higher education or just go on to complete their high school years. It also helps students prepare for active citizenship. So we talked about earlier all the ways that PBL engages kids in social activities in their communities. And lastly, it strengthens schools. It strengthens skills that students need for college and the workplace. And in many areas where PBL has been shown to be effective, the students are going to be the first one in their family to go to college. And so PBL can really strengthen skills that they may not receive from their families and can be a benefit to their family through that. Here is a list of the resources that I used for doing my research. And I hope that you've enjoyed this brief introduction to PBL, and I look forward to hearing from all of you.